Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Hello, Ryan. Gearing up for yet another trip.
I'm
Where
leaving.
are you going this time?
I'm leaving on Saturday. I'm going to go hang out in Mexico City for a little bit and then head down.
You like to stop in Mexico City no matter where you're going. So you head in Norway, make a quick stop in Mexico City.
Well, it doesn't work as well.
Layover.
Yeah. No, for Norway, I'd have to figure out what my stopover city would be. But going to be working from Mexico City for a bit to, play into all those terrible stereotypes as much as I can. And then
what are the terrible stereotypes?
We've talked about this on the pod, all the work from homers taking over Mexico
sure.
City.
Well, that's not a stereotype. That's just you actively living that truth.
Maybe that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to head down to Bogota. And I've been there before, but a couple times. But I'm excited because we've never done an episode, and there's a few places I've always wanted to go. So I'm going to be sort of hitting some different museums and a couple of restaurants I haven't been to yet. So I think folks can look forward to a Bogota episode to go along with our very popular Medellin episode. And then I'm going to Paraguay for a week, and that'll be interesting. I've been doing some research there about things to see, and then heading back north. So I'll be gone for about a month.
It's just insane. You're spending so much time in Spanish-speaking countries, yet your pronunciation continues just at its current level.
Yeah.
I have seen there might even have been some degradation based on your recent interviews about Peru.
No, I think my Spanish got kind of better in Peru, and now it's all gone again, like immediately.
You know what you could say, though, is because you travel so widely in the Spanish-speaking world, you could say that you're just mixing up accents and dialects, like you tend to adjust to the local.
Yeah. My Spanish is Peruvian,
And then people will be like, but you're in Peru and we can't understand you. Well, Ryan, but before we get too far into the episode, I want to say we've got a super exciting and interesting and very relevant topic for us today. We have an interview with a New York Times travel writer whose name is Lauren Sloss. And she wrote an article that caught my eye. The headline, which is very hooky: National Park Booking App leaves users feeling lost in the woods. That's very ominous for our beloved parks. And it's a deep dive into Recreation.gov, which you and I have talked about a lot on the pod.
Yeah, which I've always thought was, for a government website, not so bad.
I think maybe that's the problem, is that you had to add that caveat in, right? Like, it's not performing at the level that you would expect. No, I mean, it is size. It
is a better portal than, say, the New York IRS.
Sure.
Which is
the lowest. No, Recreation.gov. I agree. I've had generally good experiences with it, but she really has been talking to the industry and to frustrated tourists, and I think that it's starting to show its cracks, and maybe it's not being kept up with the amount of travel that is now surging back because of this. As we emerge out of the pandemic and people are traveling again, you have this single government portal that all of these national lands governed by lots of different agencies, all of them with different rules, some with, requirements for permits and timing and tickets and campsites. And it's an insane amount of logistics trying to shove into this one Recreation.gov portal. So we talk about our personal experiences and what she's hearing about frustrations, and some of the good sides too. It's not all bad, but it's a real deep dive into Recreation.gov and how the government might be considering hopefully improving it.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. I know that you've been using Recreation.gov to do some of our trip planning.
That's right. That's actually my last stop. So we could put that as a little teaser. I've decided where we're going, and I have a national park update.
Oh, exciting! This is news to me, folks.
Just finding out live
where I'm going.
Well, put it this way: we're going to the American South, so you're going to want to do a quick stopover in Mexico City on the way.
At this rate, I might be coming from Mexico City. We'll see.
But, you know, at the top of the episode, we also like to give a shout out to thank everybody for the recent reviews. We've been lucky recently featured on the Apple Discovery page, which brought in lots of new listeners. I'm Kiernan, that's Ryan. And thank you for leaving the reviews. Of course, we appreciate them mostly if they're 5 stars. But also, I really like the reviews that give a little bit of substantive feedback so that we can take it and incorporate it into the future episodes.
Yeah. I mean, we got a 5-star review from Adrian a couple days ago. Said he used the podcast to plan his trip to Montreal and is looking forward to those natural wine bars. We got Bagaduce Mom, who was really into Down East Maine. That's episode 84.
And also gave us a correction on some pronunciation, which is always appreciated.
And that must have been your mistake, not mine, because I didn't.
You wouldn't dare to try to pronounce that.
No. Do you want to correct it?
I think I pronounced on the episode roque, but it's properly pronounced rock, ROQUE.
Okay, Rock Bluffs.
Yes. Well, you know what I think? It's like croque madame, the sandwich, which is actually technically it is correctly pronounced croque madame.
I've never said it that way.
Well, I know, and it's fun. That's a very funny one because most Americans don't pronounce it correctly, and then if you pronounce it correctly, they think you're pronouncing it wrong. So it's this real catch-22.
Yeah. So when you're in Paris, you got to pull out your fancy pronunciation.
Now, I will say one of these reviews confused me a little bit. So the reviewer's name is Anita Vacation. Very clever. And she wrote, "At first I was skeptical with Kiernan's sarcasm, but they won me over. Love Ryan's enthusiasm." Me? Sarcastic?
I am very enthusiastic about travel. Maybe that comes through.
It kind of depends on the episode.
It's true. And when it's like Boston 7, I'm like, hello.
But Ryan, I'm convinced that this person was confused. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on the episode. I do think maybe you and I switched the enthusiastic, sarcastic role on the podcast, maybe based on who's leading the show.
Yeah, that's probably true. It's like my job to be enthusiastic about the stuff you're presenting, and your job to be enthusiastic about what I'm presenting, sarcastically.
Sure. Yeah. No. If I hear more about natural wines, I'm really going to be very excited and take a lot of notes.
Yes, you should. But
now, and Ryan, you've got just to close it out here on the reviews. There's something called Castbox. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, so Castbox is another way that folks listen to podcasts, and I've never used it, but for Apple is our top download platform. You know, a lot of people listening, most people listening are listening on their Apple Podcast app. And for a while, Spotify was our number 2. Hey, Spotify folks. And then recently, this app called Castbox has become our second, actually, biggest download app. So shout out to everybody on Castbox. Don't really know what it is, but I hope you're enjoying the pod.
What do you listen? I'm an Overcast man.
We get a little Overcast traffic. It's probably you.
Yeah.
No, I'm Apple Pod all the way.
You're all Apple Pod.
All Apple Pod all the way.
You use the native app.
I do. And they're lovely to us. So I won't talk about my frustrations with the app.
For what it's worth, I downloaded on both. So
But Kiernan, there's another thread that a few of these reviews have called out, which I think is a little bit unfair.
Oh, okay. Are we going to war?
Well, look. Somebody said.
I mean, it was inevitable that we were going to be called leftists at some point.
Well, one of the things is that this is not a travel podcast. Someone's like, look, and you can say what you want about Out of Office, okay? But I promise you, it's a travel podcast.
Yeah, first off, it's right in the name.
Right in the name.
That makes it inarguable.
Yeah. I mean, we've done episodes where we've talked about the many travels of Frederick Olmsted. We're a travel podcast.
I mean, I think once you have the New York Times travel editor on 3 times, you officially get to call yourself a travel podcast.
Yeah, we didn't have her on to talk about politics, know. So sometimes we make political jokes, and we have recently we were recently called leftist, which would be news to my Gen Z staff who think they call me Mitt Romney. But apparently we are leftist. And I
don't say we're no. We're being accused of being leftists. Yeah. There's been a series of reviews of people who saying they can't get past our any political commentary that we've baked in. As we've listened back to some old episodes, sure, we can hear that maybe politics creeps in. But what I think is a difficult issue to navigate is that people are listening to older episodes and trying to say that, why are you talking about the pandemic and Trump and when it's supposed to be a travel podcast? But these things were incredibly closely ingrained because obviously we've been dealing with running a travel podcast during several years where it was extremely difficult to travel.
Right. Like whether or not you believe in COVID, you believe that it was difficult to travel in those couple of years, right?
And, I think, Ryan, that even though you and I are liberal and we met working at a progressive company that went out and
classical liberals, though. We're classical liberals, like sure. Bobby Kennedy.
Oh, because we Catholic liberals.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that sums it up pretty well. Yeah. I do think we welcome listeners of all stripes, and we think that travel is an extremely enriching activity that everyone should be doing, and you're going to be learning the perspectives of others around the world. And yeah, when you listen to us, you're going to be hearing the more progressive perspective.
Yeah. But we can throw in a few Hunter Biden jokes now and again if that makes folks more comfortable.
I was just reading a story about that this morning at some meetings at the Chinese embassy.
Oh, gosh. Look, there we go. We made a Hunter Biden joke.
Well, we just acknowledged his existence for what it's worth.
I'm recording this on a laptop, and if I were Hunter Biden, I'd drop this off at a local laptop repair center and leave it there for 9 months. So.
See, everybody, we're not leftists. But we are, I consider us members of the squad, right?
I think now we are, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll wear it proudly. So please keep giving the reviews. We do read them, and they change the way that we're thinking about our episodes and how we run things. So we appreciate the feedback.
We appreciate the feedback, especially the 5-star ones.
Well, yeah, especially the 5-star. Now, Ryan, I also, before we get into the interview, want to do a quick segment for those who are new to the pod. You won't know it. We like to call it recalculating. Recalculating. Now, Ryan, do you remember what recalculating is?
Recalculating is generally when you've made some type of factual error and we have to go back and correct it.
No. You always say that. First of all, recalculating can be about correcting an error. Actually, we probably should have saved the pronunciation correction for the recalculating. But I don't exclusively make the errors. You two have been known for an error. But it's also for us to revisit topics that we've talked about on past episodes, give updates, and bring some, the latest to the news. And this could have fit in as a last stop, but I thought, we have covered pretty closely the story of Notre Dame since its fire several years ago. We did a whole episode right after it happened, and we've done a series of recalculating, tracking its recovery. And when I was in Paris a bit afterwards, I talked about what it looked like at that time. And The Guardian had an awesome article that we'll link to in the show notes. And the headline was, they said it was impossible how medieval carpenters are rebuilding Notre Dame. And the basic story is that there is this site in northern Burgundy in France, apparently deep in a forest, where there is a castle called Guedelin Castle. And it was a 13th century castle that fell into disrepair. And there's a group that got together, and for the past 25 years, they've had this project, which they call an exercise in experimental archaeology. And the whole idea was that they would restore this castle with the tools and the methods and the knowledge of craftsmen in the 12th and 13th century. So for 25 years, French artisans have been using chisels and hammers and trying out techniques, rediscovering lost techniques to rebuild this castle. And as they look to rebuild, particularly the roofs of Notre Dame, they are pulling on these artisans in this 25 years of knowledge to try to recreate what got burned. And the article has several of those very dramatic photos. And we were watching it in video in 2019. Yeah, heartbreaking to watch that roof go up. But these people can uniquely bring it back.
So I'm imagining these folks dressed in sort of classic, like basically costumes, like the Renaissance fair while they're working. Is that fair? Or are they dressed sort of modern? No, I really want them to lean into it. If they're going to be using these old tools and these old techniques,
you want them to be in like sort of sacks.
Yes, yeah, they should be. They should dress the period,
medieval drapery, of. How would you call it? Sort of like serf.
Yeah. Surf attire
costume.
Yeah, and like SERF, not SUR. I mean, that would be cool too. But
I understood. I don't think they're sitting there in tropical shirts and baggy sweatpants.
I'm fine with either surf or surf. One of those directions would, I think, at least be make it a little more fun to watch.
So there are some pictures of the woodworkers at work, and no, I don't believe that they are outfitted as if they were. In medieval times, but they wear aprons and work clothes that protect them. But it's fascinating to see them with the knives and the axes, and there's a lot of wooden structures all around them in these photos. And one piece that they dive deeper into in the article is about the quality of the wood and the fact that these folks make large planks for rafter beams out of a single tree, whereas in today's sawmills, you could be treating several trees and then putting them together, heating them, needing them to dry out over a long period of time to create a sturdy beam. So while their method is more time consuming, they make the point, Notre Dame's roof stayed together for 800 years and did pretty well. Yeah. So maybe there's something to this method that we've discovered.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. It's a similar story that Kim Macquarie tells in about this boat builder in South America who knows how to make these rafts in a way that even the modern ways that we do it, it's not nearly as strong. And so this guy's like 90 years old and is still being hired to build these very specific rafts. So I love these stories of sort of rediscovering techniques that have sort of been lost by the industrial age of mass production.
Well, and it really goes one step beyond. It's not just the theater of it; it's the actual doing of it. So, two more details is that they actually commissioned the blacksmith from the castle project to create the tools that they're going to use to.
And he definitely did it in costume, though. I'm sure those blacksmiths are like amazing when you go to one of those Renaissance fairs.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. I mean, this guy's not a Renaissance fair, man. He's a real blacksmith.
I don't mean to say that he's not a real blacksmith. I'm sure. Those guys are amazing. Like, I can't even imagine. My skin would, if I get close to heat, I look like a wilted flower.
Yeah, so, I mean, these are real people.
These are tough guys. Or gals.
Of course. I mean, we're just two liberal cucks here talking into microphones. I mean,
we've never held one of those hammers or whatever they call them. Yeah.
You're not sure if the word is hammer?
My dad's a construction worker, so I have held a hammer, but I don't know how to use it. But yeah. I've moved one before.
And what the second point is, they're going to be teaching these methods to lots of others who haven't been part of this project. So I love that they're spreading the knowledge. Hopefully, I would love if they were capturing a bunch of this content. We could see it in a documentary someday. I'd have to think that the French government is trying to capture all this.
If there isn't a documentary about the reconstruction of Notre Dame, then somebody really missed the boat on that, because it seems like that's going to be quite an achievement.
Well, I think it's fitting to say God willing.
God willing.
So we'll keep watching, and Macron says back by 2024. So that clock is ticking. I have a feeling they might be missing that deadline.
Yeah, they're going to eat a lot of those big turkey legs while they're fixing that.
You're really painting a very different picture. All right. Well, with that, Ryan, I think it's time for us to get to my interview about Recreation.gov with New York Times' Lauren Sloss.
It's time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
Lauren Sloss is a contributor to the New York Times who focuses on food, drink, and travel, which three of the things I talk endlessly into a microphone about. So your recent article in the Times captured my attention because it was entitled National Park Booking App Leaves Users Feeling Lost in the Woods. And as a park superfan, I always want to do my part to help get the parks back on track. So I had to invite you, Lauren, onto the show so that we could dive deep into the vicissitudes, maybe the hidden gems within Recreation.gov, and really dive deep into the problems that folks are encountering. So thanks so much for coming to Out of Office.
Thanks very much for having me.
And by the way, I do just want to give a shout out. I thought the illustration on the article was also very beautiful by an artist, Julie Ben Bassett, of kind of an evil tree emerging from a desktop or a laptop computer, enveloping a user in a very scary way.
Totally. It's fantastic. I can take zero credit for that, but I'm delighted to have it accompany my article.
It really set the tone for how difficult it can be to get where you want to go.
Absolutely.
So, for those who don't know, what is Recreation.gov?
Recreation.gov is a online platform that is managed by Department of the Interior, and it covers booking. So be that a pass for entering a national park, or an experience at a national monument, or a campsite in a national forest, for 4,200 federally managed sites. And I mentioned a couple of those in there, but that includes national parks, national forests, memorials, historic districts, and other recreational areas.
And so does that mean that it crosses all sorts of departments? It's not just Department of Interior. It's not just the national parks. It's like most federal lands, if not all federal lands, book through this one portal.
Exactly. Anything administered by the Park Service, the U.S. Forest Service, and the Bureau of Land Management, and other agencies on top of that. So those are some of the big ones.
Do you know, are they allowed to have separate platforms, independent on their sites, or must everybody go through Recreation.gov?
I believe they need to, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly looking at the scale and browsing on it, it becomes the kind of one-stop shop for anything,
Sure.
anything government land.
Then again, state parks tend to have their own platforms, at least in California. California state parks, I believe, are booked through something else, which is also confusing and hard to get a handle on.
Well, and even if you're not looking to book something, but you're just looking for the basic information, most of the information doesn't live on Recreation.gov. So if you're looking to a national park, usually there's a big, robust, very definitively national park site. And then right when you look to book a campsite or look into a tour ticket, it says, oh, you know what, go to Recreation.gov.
Correct. And once you get to Recreation.gov, it's not always obvious how to get where you need to go.
And so it's your article dives deep into the frustrations that travelers, individual travelers, but also the travel industry are having with Recreation.gov. So where are those failings? Where is it falling apart?
Sure. So as you mentioned, the travel industry, kind of as a unified body, put out a letter to the National Park Service Director and the Department of the Interior Secretary, Deb Haaland. And their primary complaint was that in this moment, with U.S. borders pretty much being open for international travel, international travelers are starting to come back, hopefully closer to pre-pandemic levels, that the inability to book very far in advance for some of the most popular national parks and attractions would be a huge deterrent to getting international visitor numbers back to pre-pandemic levels. And I think that's a really interesting jumping off point because, well, that complaint is very true. Many national parks have a 30 to 60 day window for booking entry, booking a campsite. Sidebar, most of the parks have different booking windows. So if you want to say go to Yosemite and Joshua Tree and Arches, you probably have to figure out a different system for every single one, which is confusing. A lot of domestic travelers have a different complaint that they find it impossible to plan semi-last minute because everything is booked up and they don't feel confident that they'll be able to get a site last minute, that they'll be able to show up without something booked. And again, in some parks, you need a reservation to enter the park at all. That was kind of a confusing explanation, but it's a confusing system. I think that the major points are complaints about booking windows, be it that they're too short, they're too long, or that they're inconsistent.
Yep.
I'm going to repeat myself and list inconsistency as its own point, because the different requirements and systems in place for each park, and beyond that for specific campgrounds and attractions within each park, it's very confusing and difficult to get a handle on. And let me see. Third, just if you're not tech savvy, comfortable digging through a website with 8 million things on it. Beyond that, if you're not comfortable with camping, if you're a first-time camper, if you don't have deep knowledge of the place that you're visiting, it can be really hard to figure out what you should be booking and how you should be getting there.
Yeah, I'm a real avid trip planner. And so usually I look at these challenges and I like really dig in. And I actually am encountering this right now. I'm thinking about going to Mammoth Cave. And I want to book. You can't go into that national park. You can't go into the cave system without booking a tour. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that past the end of September, there's no tours available. So I actually emailed the park and said, I'm not going to book my trip unless I know I can get into the cave. And they kind of said, our hands are tied. Just keep refreshing Recreation.gov and they'll release them at some point. They couldn't even give me the window, though I do give them credit that they answered my email within a day.
I'm actually really surprised that they wrote you back. But exactly,
Me too.
I mean, the fact is, even as someone who relishes planning and is good at it, you're kind of forced into a situation where you're sitting, refreshing your browser window, hoping that you get what you want.
Totally. And if you're trying to do a mixed trip where maybe you're staying in a lodge or a hotel and then you're trying to camp on a separate night, that kicks you off into even further systems, because a lot of the national parks especially deal with a separate hospitality vendor who have their own horrible websites. So even that isn't integrated into the single Recreation.gov experience.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you say that you are a planner and you really enjoy doing that. Depending on the trip, if I, again, really want to go to a specific place, do a specific activity, sure. But in general, I prefer to be more spontaneous. I love a road trip where I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to end up or what kind of hike I'll feel like doing on a certain day. Or maybe we thought we'd stay in a hotel, but it's so beautiful out that we'd rather camp. I like being able to decide spur of the moment. And the way things are set up now, it's not obvious that you can do that.
We mentioned frustrations from travelers, from travel industry. Have you heard any voices from within the park system? Do you think this is a frustration for administrators at Yellowstone?
I think so. I think it's kind of universally understood that it is an imperfect system. And I mean, per the email that you got, I'm sure the folks that were responding to you were incredibly sympathetic to your plight. I mean,
Sure.
They work at a national park because they love it and they want to be able to share it with people. And I spoke to someone from, I think it was Allegheny National Forest Visitors Bureau, who was one of the people who signed this massive letter from the travel industry, which had almost 400 co-signers on it, both US based and internationally. And she commented that, the public finds it really confusing. If they're trying to rent a cabin in one place, they have to go through multiple pages to be able to find the Allegheny National Forest and then find the right campground and then find the right kind of accommodation at that campground. So I think there's certainly frustration from that end as well.
Have you used Recreation.gov extensively? I'm just wondering if was it a good experience? Was it a bad experience? Do you think these are accurate concerns?
Personally, I would say that I have had neutral experiences with Recreation.gov. And that's, again, largely because both I and the people that I camp with, including my husband, my friends, are quite tech savvy, or at least tech comfortable, and have done a lot of camping. So in general, if we want to do a specific backcountry trip in Yosemite, which we tend to do every year, we have a game plan where we are aware of the days and times that backcountry permits are going to open, and we coordinate an assault on Recreation.gov so that between us, our group will have enough permits to be able to do our trip. Otherwise, if we are being more spontaneous, we're comfortable enough that if, say, we tried to drive through Yellowstone and couldn't get a campsite, we're confident that we can find something on BLM land or something in a national forest or something on another campsite entirely and be fine. We're not,
or a Walmart parking lot.
Correct. Yeah. We've spent enough time camping and enough time sleeping in a very large trunk of a rental vehicle that if we have to do it again, it's not a big deal. But if it's your first time out, if you've never camped before, if you haven't done that kind of travel, I think that's really intimidating. And I think that can be a deterrent to people who would love to explore our national parks and to spend more time outdoors.
I have a sinking feeling that I know the answer, but did Interior give any sort of explanation that was satisfying, that suggested they're aware of the issue, they're working on it?
I got a statement from the National Park Service, not from the Department of the Interior, basically saying that the agency appreciates the feedback and they're adjusting and improving, and they would like to make things more consistent and more clear. So again, I don't know if there's anyone who thinks that Recreation.gov is great. I can't say on the record that no one does, but I imagine that the people behind it recognize that there are issues that need to be fixed. That said, I do understand the need for a reservation system. Overcrowding in the parks was a huge issue during the pandemic and before. And part of the importance of national parks is, yes, to be accessible to people, to appreciate and to fall in love with nature and to, recognize the magnificent terrain that we have in this country, but also to protect them and to keep them from being overrun and destroyed.
Yeah, I am sympathetic on right. The demand for what they're trying to give access to, very difficult. And also, of course, you want to be democratic about it. But, there's talk about potentially selling passes that get you into parks eventually, especially for these most overcrowded. And so, how does that go against the ideal of what the parks and national lands are supposed to be for? That's very difficult territory. And then just logistically, so many different lands with so many different internal systems and so many separate offerings that they want to make available. Even if you gave that job to Google, I think it's a pretty significant UX challenge just to make it understandable and clear. And you have to do it on desktop. You have to do it on laptop. You probably have to do it on low bandwidth for when you're deep inside the parks. It's a pretty formidable challenge. I could see where a full overhaul is a many years operation. Absolutely.
And I raised the complaint about the inconsistency between the parks, which it's confusing. Don't get me wrong. But as you said, the parks themselves are so different and have such different crowd levels. So yeah, you need a reservation to be able to drive through Yosemite right now, but I wouldn't want that to be the case for every national park if it doesn't have to be. I understand why there are differences, and you're so right. There's a lot to complain about, but it's also a huge undertaking.
And, a lot of booking sites find themselves the target of ill-intentioned actors who are trying to book something and then resell it for profit. I'm thinking of the concert tickets, Ticketmaster system that's gone crazy recently.
Right.
Is that at all a problem at Recreation.gov, or is this national parks crowd, public lands crowd, tend to be a pretty trustworthy group?
It's definitely an issue. And I think it really has been since national park, or really since camping reservations went online, to different degrees, depending on how popular it is, where it's based. But I think it has been an issue. I don't think that all of the bots per se that are crawling sites and alerting people to campsites, I don't think they're all doing it for profit. I think there are some that are kind of just trying to alert people or be another resource for people who are trying to book.
So what exactly do? They ping you once reservations become available?
I think it depends on the system, frankly. I'm not an expert in that. I do know that there have been complaints about it really for years at this point. And I don't have an enormous sense of the scope of the problem at present, or if it's gotten more under control, or if it's just become kind of an accepted part of what goes on.
Right. I think it's usually fairly reliable that somebody who is computer savvy and gets very frustrated with these systems goes off and can create a tool that allows them to get around it and kind of hack it.
Absolutely. And I think that something that some of these bots do, and that would frankly be just an enormous win if and when there is ever a major overhaul of Recreation.gov, is some kind of notification that you can kind of get yourself on a wait list for a pass or a campsite or an experience, and get a text or get an email when someone cancels, because cancellations happen all the time. That's another complaint that I got, that people will talk about how they sat up for however long hitting refresh to get a campsite, get it and get there, and it's half empty because there are no shows, because like things happen. But what a frustrating thing to go through all this stress to get where you want to go. Hopefully you do, but regardless, there probably would be space if you just showed up.
I'd just be happy there's fewer neighbors. That one I'm less sympathetic on.
Sure, but what if there are fewer neighbors, but you can't get into the campground because you don't have a reservation when it's half empty?
Of course. Do you know, are there day of, if that happens, if there's massive cancellations, will some of the parks try to open those up for people that can just walk up?
I think it depends on the park. Again, everything is different depending on where you are. But I spoke to someone for this story who experienced that at Glacier National Park, and she was not able to get into a campground that was largely empty without a reservation.
And it would be, from my experience in the parks, I think it would be virtually impossible to create one set of rules to apply across the full field. If you get a cancellation, you must repost it on Recreation.gov. It just seems like you'd never be able. First, I think the tech savviness inside the parks can vary hugely. And then secondly, I just think how often travelers' plans change. It would be very difficult unless you really had a devoted resource doing that to make it work.
Absolutely. And if we've learned anything over the last couple of years, it's that plans can and will change for any number of reasons all the time.
Yeah. For those who are coming away from this conversation a bit scared now of Recreation.gov, what tips do you have about how to approach it and how to approach the broader planning a trip that incorporates these lands?
Sure. So as an avowed spontaneous spur of the moment traveler, I will say
I knew I should have put you on with Ryan instead of me. That's more.
No, I mean the world needs us both. The world needs us both.
That's right.
But as someone who loves a spontaneous trip, if there is a park or a place that you really want to go that is on your wish list that you are dying to see, plan ahead and do a lot of research. It's worth it. I mean, like I said, I have a Yosemite trip that I do every year with friends, and it is worth planning ahead for. It's worth finding the right dates. It's worth setting our alarms and making our reservations as soon as we can. So do that, do research. And the park websites are usually a pretty good place to start. They generally try and lay out the current rules as clearly as they can. If you are still confused and still have questions, there is usually a wealth of information to be found on Facebook groups that are dedicated to parks.
Yeah.
Various social media. Obviously, ask your community. Hopefully someone has or knows someone who has been to the place that you're trying to go and can give you advice. A very small detail, if you are trying to book and you have to book within a certain time, create a Recreation.gov account ahead of time. I've run into this. I've had friends and family members run into this, where you are online certain time, have what you want secured, but you have to create an account and you lose what you are trying to book. So
nightmare scenario.
Exactly. So that's a really small, easy thing you can do. Something else we haven't touched on is the lottery system, which is, I don't know how recent a development that is, but a relatively recent development for some of the most popular attractions like Yosemite's Half Dome. I think some of the hikes in Arches are on a lottery system. And those are meant to be a vaguely more equitable way to get people into these really, really popular parts of parks. So you apply for dates that you want to go. if you're going with a group, you can all apply for the dates that you want to go, for the number of permits that you want, and it's random. So if that's on your list, look into it, familiarize yourself with it, and go from there. Beyond that, it's worth noting that we all love the big marquee parks. Of course, they're magnificent and they're very popular for many reasons, but there are lesser known, smaller parks that are less crowded, that don't have such restrictive access and can be visited more last minute, or perhaps could be a backup if you're planning a longer trip with many sites that are within driving distance or however you're planning on traveling. Beyond that, I mean, there are national forests, there are state parks, there is so much beautiful wilderness to be explored. I certainly understand wanting to visit the place that you want to visit. I mean, you should be able to, but it's worth kind of expanding your scope a bit.
I really liked the tip about state parks, because in many, many areas where there's a national park, state lands will abut it. And so you could see being able to get access to the park without being able to get a campsite, and checking out those state booking sites where, maybe you're driving an hour out and an hour back, but at least you get to stay close by. Absolutely.
There are also private campgrounds. There's Hipcamp, where you can very easily book places to camp online. That's very straightforward. It involves paying for them, but so be it. And you mentioned the Walmart parking lot, which, if you have a trailer or an RV or a van, most Walmart parking lots welcome overnight guests. So it's worth checking beforehand, because some don't.
I don't know Hipcamp. What is that?
Hipcamp is, as mentioned, pretty similar to Airbnb. And you search by area, and it's usually private land that people have listed. And you can book a site for a night or two, or however long you're looking to stay.
Do people just open up their backyards to campers?
I think I get the impression it's less backyard and more
adjacent fields.
Yeah. But it kind of depends. Some are really rustic, and some are like full-on glamping sites.
One other tip that I would have, if you're looking particularly to a park and you just can't figure out on Recreation.gov or their website the information you're looking for, ping them in the comments of their social media accounts. Most of these parks have a pretty active social media manager who's looking to interact with people who are trying to plan. So just hit them in the comments once, twice, every day until you get your answer. That can be very successful. And many, many parks have a nonprofit tied to them, which are local community groups that raise money that then go into the parks. And they may have more resources or people who are fielding more emails than the park itself. So those are just other avenues where you could beg your way into some more information.
Definitely. And get tips on what you should try for if the thing you had in mind isn't accessible.
So Lauren, given that we're in national park land, I do have to ask, you take the yearly trip. Do you have a favorite?
Yosemite is just so hard to beat for me. In part because I've spent so much time there, and in part because it's magnificent. It's just, it's hard seeing a sunset down the Tuolumne Canyon from a peak is just like an image that I will treasure for my entire life. But beyond that, I had a lot of fun in the Grand Tetons. Really enjoyed exploring there. And Yellowstone really blew me away. I was prepared to be underwhelmed, which is a really snotty thing to say. But it's so popular and it was so crowded.
Yeah.
And it was really crowded when I was there. And we just drove through the day and did some day hikes. But it was amazing. It was really beautiful. So I stand very corrected. Yellowstone was great.
I think that is ending on exactly the note we should, which is persist, persist, persist. It is worth it. You will forget how miserable Recreation.gov may have made your booking, and you will remember the visit there.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much. And I'll of course, include a link out to some of the resources in your article in our show notes. And now it's time for the last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan. Well, we're here in the last stop. This is first we should begin by saying thank you to Lauren Sloss for joining us. I learned a lot about Recreation.gov there, and it's going to change the way that I approach booking out plans through any of these public lands.
Yeah. I was hoping for a little bit. I was hoping to hear a little bit more of a commitment from the government to make the website stronger, but it sounds like they're listening to feedback, but they're not laying out a timeline for real updates.
I'm not sure beta testing, fast turnaround, disruptive, break it to make it better. I'm not sure that's really the government's way.
No.
But there's some hope. Frankly, I think that they should get some credit for the fact that it works at all, because you do have so many logistical difficulties that are different park to park. I think we can probably assume that's slightly understaffed at a lot of places, maybe majorly understaffed at a lot of places. So, if you're persistent, make it work. And I think the headline should be, it's going to be worth it, because the trips that you take facilitated by Recreation.gov, you're going to forget about how miserable Recreation.gov was. You're going to remember how great the trip was.
And it can't be worse than buying a ticket on like Ticketmaster, which is just, to this day, is still like the most frustrating experience in the world.
Yeah, fair enough. But Ryan, we're now here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the people segment. And it's where, most of the rest of the show, we're rushing, we're joking, we're trying to one up each other. We're diving into controversial topics. It's, leftists versus Trump. It's just drama. This is a space not for drama. In fact, you got to hope that those conservative listeners have made it to this place in the show, because this is it's almost a meditation. It's a feeling of community. It's where we share unto each other, because you and I each bring one thing each week, and it's got to be, it really can be anything. It can be a dream. It can be a book. It can be an article. It can be a piece of gear. It can be a plan that we're making. It can be anything, but it has to fit just this one piece of criterion. It has to inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So, Ryan, I have to ask you, as I ask you every episode, do you have a last stop this week?
I do have a last stop. So the folks at Club Med commissioned a big travel survey to ask travelers what are their 10 happiest travel destinations in North America. And when you think of like happy places in North America, I think of like Orlando. That's like a happy place, right?
Orlando, I love you, Orlando.
Oh my gosh, I literally just went to see the Book of Mormon a couple weeks ago.
I know, I saw that. Yeah, what is this, second time, third time?
Third time. It is in such good shape. It's been running for years.
Show.
It's so funny. It's so funny.
But listen, we know the listeners hate Broadway. I almost didn't sing the Orlando song.
Well, look, so the number one happiest, now the word happiest here, I think is what caught me. Las Vegas.
Oh God, that's so it's really drunkest. It's a list of the drunkest.
Yeah, but it's just, if you've ever like been to Las Vegas and then you fly out of Las Vegas and you're at the airport, you would never say those people are happy. They look like they've just been through like a war. Like some guy's just lost his, gave up his mortgage. Like somebody's gotten divorced. It's never like happy folks leaving Vegas.
No. Well, I mean, I think like there's probably 1 per 1,000 leaving very happy.
Sure. Yeah, the one who beats the house. But
exactly.
Who's that? Yeah. So interesting pick. New Orleans.
Maybe they're including the house in that. The house is very happy.
Yeah. Because if it was just of casino owners, they're like, yeah, it's very terrific. New Orleans. New Orleans is a happy city. That's a happy city. I'll give it.
Agreed. I think they're a very resilient city.
Absolutely.
But you're right. You know what I would call them? I'd call them a joyful city.
Joyful is a good way. The music, the food, the nightlife. Joyful is a good way. Now, I've never been to Vancouver, and I've heard lovely things about it. I know they shot the X-Files there. So that makes me happy.
Classic happy comedy.
But, it's interesting to see like Vancouver, Halifax make this list. I don't know much about Halifax. Have you been?
No, I haven't been to Halifax.
Yeah. And then here's a couple that are not happy cities. San Francisco.
Oh, one of the most miserable cities.
Yeah, give me a break. It's a beautiful city.
Give me a break.
It's a beautiful city. Not happy.
Well, I mean, I think we can agree that it's the rise of Silicon Valley that's taken. I think it used to be a far happier.
Well, if you use the word gay as happy, then
sure.
Certainly at some points in its history, it's been a very happy city.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point.
Los Angeles. I just got back from Los Angeles. That is not a happy city.
I think a city where you can walk like that little, it cannot be a happy city.
No. If you're just sitting in traffic for 3.5 hours to get 10 minutes down the road.
Well, unless you're listening to our podcast, then
that's
very
true.
happy.
That's true. And then I'll round up the list here. Washington, D.C. is on the list, which I don't even know how to comment about that. Because like no one in D.C. is that happy. It's a cool city. There's a lot to do.
Oh, yeah.
But is it a happy city?
That's right. And I do want to say the same thing about San Francisco. While we're judging it as not a happy city, still think it's a great city.
It's a great city. No doubt. But it's just not, I don't think of people just being happy. But number 10, Nashville. I have to say, Nashville's a pretty happy city.
Not very happy city.
Pretty happy city. There's so much live music, so much food, so much just, excitement. So I'll give it Nashville.
Portland, Maine is a very happy city.
They have Portland, Oregon on this list, which I also think is a very cool city that is not very happy necessarily.
Oh, I think of Portland, Oregon as very happy. I disagree with you there. Yes, I absolutely do. I think a city that's in such close proximity to great nature is more likely to be happy.
But wouldn't Denver have been on this list as a happier city?
Oh, Denver's a very happy city for sure.
Anyway, interesting. Like, I wonder.
Does it say how they're judging this happiness, or is this just somebody trying to fill 100 words for the day?
No, a survey was like a mix of travel responses. One of the things was the price of a draft domestic beer. In which case, New Orleans should be way up that list. I mean, you can get beer pretty cheap there. So they use a couple different factors, but I just thought it was a sort of a strange list and missing some of the what I would consider like the usual suspects for happiness. Like they have Toronto, but not Montreal. Montreal is 1,000 times more happy and fun than Toronto. I mean, Toronto, again, a very cool city. I like Toronto a lot, but you're not just walking around, just like smiling all the time, in Toronto.
All right, let me ask this one: where would you put Chicago on this scale?
I don't think Chicago's like a super happy city. It's too much of a city to be like a happy place, but it's
interesting.
Truly a great city, right? It's like a world-class city.
But I'm tempted to say New York. Well, is New York a happy city?
Yeah, but you couldn't to have San Francisco and not New York. Like, New York is a happier city than San Francisco.
I agree on that. Yeah. But does it tip into actually being happy?
It's probably a couple months, like the first month of summer when people are like emerging, that people are happy. In fall, people are happy.
You got to judge New York as a happy city because if you're going to put up with all the difficult parts of New York, you better be pretty happy.
I'm looking around my social circle, not the happiest bunch of folks,
It's a fair point.
Anyway, we'll link to the survey, folks. Send us your happiest city.
And let us know if they've misjudged you.
And this is North America. They could have done Puerto Vallarta. That's a happy city. Like nobody's in Puerto Vallarta having a bad time.
Well, that could be the follow-up.
Yeah. Now, did you've been doing some trip planning for us, Kiernan?
That's right. So my last stop this week is the announcement, Ryan, that I've chosen where we're going. And we're going to go to Mammoth Cave National Park, the largest cave system in the world, still being discovered. They're still getting into the depths of how big this cave system actually is. They're using advanced techniques to find hidden passageways. And
I really hope we're not a part of the discovery of any new cave.
No, I don't want to Tom Sawyer this.
No.
So, of course, we all know your history with Tom Sawyer.
I'm a splunker.
And the word you're looking for is spelunker. No, I don't want to do any serious spelunking while we're there, Ryan. But this ties directly to what we were talking about on Recreation.gov because a few weeks ago, what was holding me back from committing to Mammoth Cave was you have to book through Recreation.gov to get a tour at Mammoth Cave. and you can't get into the cave without a tour. And so I was getting nervous that none of these tickets were being made available. And I emailed the park. The park got right back to me, and they said, and I'm nobody. And they just, well, maybe.
But you probably sent it from the out of office Gmail. So they were like, whoa.
Do you know that I did not? I sent it from my personal for exactly that reason, because I wanted to be treated, like a regular person.
Yeah.
And they got back to me within a couple days and said, Recreation.gov will release it. Just keep your eye out. And so I've been looking every few days, and I didn't look yesterday, but what do you know? They sent me a follow-up email.
Whoa, that's service.
Hey, just wanted to let you know Recreation.gov's now released the tickets, so go on and book. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
So you can have great hospitality experiences, even with these government run parks. I just because Recreation.gov got so many demerits in the interview, I just want to give a big shout out to the service at Mammoth Cave. Thank you for pointing me to the tickets. And Ryan and I will be there.
That's exciting. Send me the deets.
I'm going to send you the deets. I'm now that they've released the tickets. This is going to be a terrific trip. We've got they've got some very long tours. You can spend 3-4 hours in the cave. Some of them focus on some of the most notable, largest, most impressive caverns. So, for example, there's one called Cleveland Avenue, and that's a very long tour. You can also go on a historic tour that gives you like a broader overview of the cave system. And then they've got some major landmarks, like there's one area that's called the Frozen Niagara because of the way the rock formations are. So I'm going to do a little research onto which of these is the best fit. Maybe we'll fit in 2 tours. I don't know if we can time it out that way, but we'll, of course, be reporting it all back here on the pod.
Well, I am super excited. I haven't been in a cave for a bit, so...
Actually, Caves 101 might want to be the next return trip after the episode we're going to release after today's episode.
Yeah. So next week we're taking. We've started this thing called the Return Trip, where we're visiting some of our best episodes from early on in the pod. So. Last week, folks got to listen to Historic Houses in America, which was our 4th episode. So we went way back in the old archive for that.
I really liked listening back to that, Ryan. At the opening, we hadn't quite found the cadence yet.
Yeah.
So you were saying, I'm Ryan Davis, I'm Kiernan Schmidt. And then you said, this is Out of Office, a travel podcast. Whereas today, this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
Right. And we didn't have the tagline. So there's this whole fun bit where we're like, you're giving me a bunch of bad ideas. And
the quest for the tagline,
yeah,
of course.
Yeah. So folks,
I still
it is
think
a classic.
Pack Your Bags, Buster Brown is a better option.
We're very happy with this seat taken.
I've got hundreds of this seat taken by a leftist. That's going to be the next one.
So we're going next week. We're taking another return trip to an episode that aired originally in December 2018 about your trip to Iceland. Which is called Iceland is an Iceland. So
I had a great tour of Iceland, and Iceland, obviously, for those listening in the United States, a terrific. If you're just acclimating yourself back into international travel as we come out of COVID, this all the content in there still stands. There hasn't been massive changes to Iceland since the visit. a good overview, suggestion of a road trip. And some of the biggest sites, including many wonderful waterfalls.
That's gonna be awesome. And then the week after, we come in at you with a fresh new episode, Pittsburgh 101, which I'm super excited about.
You just visited Pittsburgh for the first time?
No, not for the first time, but it's the first time I've really had time to do a lot more stuff. So
okay.
Yeah. So I'm excited
You went beyond business travel.
Exactly. I stayed a couple extra days and gosh, there are a lot of museums in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, looked like a terrific museum town from your Instagram.
It's all the Carnegie's had a few dollars to spend. So, and they spent them on museums.
I can't wait to hear your recap of it.
Yeah. Well, look, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
I can't wait to go splunking with you, Kiernan.
Ryan, I'm a married man.